So after the Last Supper, Jesus and his disciples would have left and they would have made their way to the Garden of Gethsemane. And I think it's important to note that this is a place that Jesus found himself in regularly. Jesus was all about communion with the Father, all about talking with God, all about getting away and having that time to talk with the Father and make sure that he was always in alignment. And so he takes his 12 disciples and pulls out Peter, James, and John, takes them a little farther and says, pray that you won't fall into temptation. And then he goes on and prays by himself and talks with God. And he basically says, Father, if there's a different way, I would love a plan B,
right?
A different option.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to note that in our humanness, it's not wrong to wish that there were easier ways.
Sure.
But at the end of it, Jesus says, but nevertheless, it's not about my comfort. It's about your plan. It's about me being obedient wherever it takes me. And if this is the plan, if this is the cup you have for me, I drink it. And so we find Jesus in total obedience to the Father, which is a beautiful place where I'd hope we all would be.
What is there to say, though, thinking about now that the position of the disciples at the dinner and all this, and now they're at prayer with Jesus, and there's some comfort in them, and they moved from the dinner and the confusion that they had to now the garden where he says, hey, stay awake with me, and they're like, they don't realize anything now is any different. Like, what's that there? Like, to me, it seems like
there's no immediacy to it.
Right. There's no urgency from them at that point. Although at dinner, Jesus says, I earnestly desire to eat this with you, and he goes through all of that. To me as a disciple, it seems like there's some ebbs and flows, and then all of a sudden it's like pours on for them. And that's an interesting thing that Jesus, in the midst of all this, is that, I don't know, that they don't see that at that moment.
Yeah, it's so interesting that, before he even makes his way, he says, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die, and I will be raised.
Yeah.
And then at the table, he uses these elements. He says, this is what's going to happen. Then he tells Judas, go and do what you're going to do. One of you is going to betray me. And yet you're exactly right. They still aren't getting it somehow.
Right.
And which is a scary question to ask ourselves. How many times do we not understand completely what God is doing, and we're kind of on the sidelines falling asleep as well?
Right.
So after he had prayed, Judas, who knew exactly where Jesus would be, because Jesus was always one about going to talk to the Father, came with, it says that it was probably Jewish guards and a few Roman centurions to make sure that there was no trouble. And Jesus is arrested in the garden while praying.
I think that's the point where Peter says, oh, okay. We see it. He gets excited. He gets a little overeager. He gets involved with things. And it's like, I don't know. I just keep wanting to put myself in their shoes of, I wish I would have listened a little sooner. Now let me step in kind of thing. Whereas if he would have just been right next to Jesus where he warned them to be, he encouraged them to be, what I feel like we miss a lot of things because we feel like we can, again, just enjoy Jesus from a distance.
Absolutely.
And there's that there. There's that for us.
Absolutely. I mean, you go back to Matthew 16 when Peter is saying, no, that's not going to happen to you. We're not going to let that happen to you. And to Peter's credit, he is acting upon his conviction. Unfortunately, that's exactly counter what Jesus said is going to happen, what he said has to happen. And Jesus, once again, he stops him in Matthew 16, and he once again stops him there and says, put your sword away. I'm the Prince of Peace. I'm not coming to overthrow the Roman government. There's a bigger thing at play here. I am here to fulfill the will of the Father. I'm here to fulfill this redemption plan that Colossians says was talked about from before time began. And so I cannot let you derail God's plan simply because of your fear or your desire to take up your arm and make things happen. And so we see Judas betraying Jesus, ironically with a kiss, and Jesus once again is left in the hands of others. And so we take the second candle and we understand that Jesus is one step closer to his life and light being snuffed out.